Joe Biden is out, and it's clear that Kamala Harris is going to be the Democrat nominee. The party brass want her, the donors want her, all the elected officials, these super delegates, as they would be called if there were a real convention in later in August, they all want Kamala Harris to be the contender to go up against Donald Trump. So now we're seeing polling. Before Harris had actually been named as Biden's successor apparent, and before Biden had dropped out, some polling firms had already started to question who would you vote for, Harris or Donald Trump. Now, we saw a YouGov poll for CBS, 3-point difference, 51-48. We saw Ipsos with Reuters at 44-44. Well, now Ipsos has a poll out after all of these announcements, and Harris is ahead by 2, 44-42. Here to talk more about this is Darrell Bricker. He is the global CEO for Ipsos Public Affairs. Joins me here in Toronto. Darrell, is this a runaway race for Kamala Harris now? Is that how we read the poll after what a 10-day period that saw an assassination attempt, a sitting president say he wouldn't be a candidate, and someone else step in? Can we just go automatically to it's a runaway race for Harris now?
No, that would be a great overstatement, and I know you're saying that for effect. But
I'm
no,
being
I mean,
facetious.
but I think what is fair to say is that for Democrats and for independents who are leaning Democrat, having Kamala Harris in the race has given them a sense of hope. So what we're seeing right now is, I would say, a bit of a warm afterglow from the events of the last couple of days, and the reaction of that critical group of voters for the Democrats has so far been positive. But as many people have been saying over the last couple of days, there's still 100+ days left in this campaign. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. And we don't know what the longer term effect is, because in many ways people are just really getting introduced to Kamala Harris. So what how this is going to endure is going to be interesting. Frankly, given the amount of euphoria we've been seeing all through the media and other places over the change from Biden to Harris, you would have expected some sort of a bump, maybe even a bigger bump. But it seems to be a relatively modest bump. We'll see if it grows or if it shrinks back to being a tighter race than these numbers currently show.
She's somewhat of a known quantity, not quite as known as Donald Trump, but she has been vice president the last 3.5 years. She was a senator before that. Her personal approval rating was not great. I've seen it as low as 37. I'm not sure which firm had that figure, but as low as 37% approval rating. So she wasn't doing great, but Joe Biden was at the point where people wondered, can he finish a sentence? Never mind another term. And so felt like there were a lot of people who were just saying, maybe they'd voted Democrat before, or they were the independents, as you say, who lean Democrat, who were saying, no, I just can't do it. Either they wouldn't vote, or they'd vote for Trump or something else, but they weren't going to vote for Biden. So you're essentially saying that what we're seeing is people coalesce around Harris now, but do we need to wait a bit of time? I mean, when you and I talk polls, we're always talking trends, and you're a pollster, and you're always saying, look at trends. How far down do we have to wait before we can say something is a trend going one way or another, either still a deadlock race or one or the other candidate moving ahead?
Well, at the moment, I would say you're going to have to give it a week to 10 days. But also, the agenda is going to be owned by the Democrats for the space of the next few weeks. I mean, their convention is in mid-August, so you really only know where the race is after the convention. But I would interpret the numbers that we're seeing for Harris right now as maybe closing the enthusiasm gap a little bit that existed with Biden for Democrats and independents who lean Democrat, rather than an overwhelming endorsement of Kamala Harris. I mean, they only changed by a couple of points, and quite frankly, her favorability ratings only rose by 5. Now, that's a fairly significant move in a short period of time. We'll see if it continues to go up, but I don't think that anybody should be popping champagne corks at this point. It's going to take a while.
What was the term you used there? The gap you were talking about?
Enthusiasm gap. I
enthusiasm
think
gap, right?
the biggest problem the Democrats had was they knew what they were voting against, but they didn't know what they were voting for. And there was little enthusiasm around voting for Joe Biden. What Harris may have done is not only given them a reason to participate to stop something, which would be Donald Trump and the Republicans, but also an opportunity to vote for something. And maybe Harris represents that. And Brian, I know you and I have discussed this before, but the left needs to love. Progressives needs to love. They need leaders that they can believe in. They need leaders in which, when they vote for them, it's a vote of affirmation about something for the future.
Inspirational.
Yeah, so Canadian listeners would be thinking Justin Trudeau in 2015. Conservatives tend not to be as much that. They don't necessarily need to be attracted by the personality of the individual who's going to be in power. What they really tend to vote for is, an intention to make change or to correct something that had gone on before. So that's why in the Canadian circumstance, when we talk about Polyev and people go through, all the issues that they have with him, it's not really about Polyev right now. It's about change. And that's what Kamala Harris is facing. When we get past this euphoria period, we're going to move into a period in which we're going to go back to what it was that was really motivating the public for voting against Joe Biden. And it wasn't necessarily his competence. There was some aspect of that, but it wasn't as closely correlated to vote as I think a lot of people were assuming. What really was driving opposition to the Democrats continuing to lead the United States was, first of all, a very strong desire for change. People just wanted to change direction. And then the second thing was two or three issues right at the top of the agenda in which Trump and the Republicans have a big lead. And that things like, for example, the economy and immigration, two top issues in this race so far that the Republicans have a huge lead on. So the question is, can Kamala Harris deal with the fact that people want change? Can she actually represent change? Remains to be seen. And the second thing is, are her positions on immigration and the economy enough to narrow the gap that currently exists with Trump and the Republicans on those two most important issues?
Well, on immigration, she was put in charge of the border and didn't go to the border. And a report I saw said she hasn't spoken to the last two people in charge of the border. So she's going to have a hard time on the immigration front. On the economy, you know, I've heard a lot of Democrats say, well, Joe Biden's economy has done really well. And it's like what I hear the Trudeau guy say, we're this in the OECD, we're that on this metric. And it's very macroeconomic issues, but how people are feeling about their economic prospects is very different. And my guess is that's kind of the same in the United States. You can point to some study, some global organization that ranks countries and say, see, we're doing really well. But if the people don't feel it, well, they're not going to be inspired to vote for
Right. And, if you're a political leader going around to people and saying, you're wrong, let me explain why.
you.
It's not a good position to be in. We just put out. You may have seen me tweet it before. Maybe you missed this, Brian. But we have our "What Worries the World" survey that we do every month, in which we ask people what are the biggest issues facing the world today, and also what are the biggest issues in your country. And so we asked. It was a series of 18 issues we asked people. And number one issue, again, although it's declining in the world today, is inflation. That's not people saying, I'm looking at what Statistics Canada is putting out on inflation, or what the OECD is putting out on inflation, or the World Bank is putting out on inflation. That's people talking about cost of living. Can they get by today, at the end of the week, and through the rest of the month? Are they going to be able to meet their bills? Canada today is number 2 in the world, 29 countries behind Turkey, as feeling inflation is the most important issue facing the country. The United States is number 3. So that shows you the level of prominence of these issues. And going and telling people that the inflation rate is down and that you shouldn't be feeling as bad as you're feeling is kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
It's not what people want to hear. And if you're explaining on these issues, you're probably losing.
So you say a week to 10 days, we'll start to get a sense of the national numbers, but then it comes down to battleground states. And that is really where the rubber meets the road. That's what matters. So, how long does it take to get a decent sense on those smaller sample sizes in those geographic areas where we can
Well,
say, yeah, Michigan's leaning more towards Harris than they were towards Biden, or Pennsylvania's still with Trump?
I think people are going to be polling like mad on that over the space of the next while. So I think same time period, maybe a little bit longer, but yeah, I think it'll become clearer as this kind of settles into the kind of race that it's going to be. It's going to take on the character that it is. But I'll just remind everybody who's listening to this: Donald Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by 2 points. That's what happened in
Yeah.
2016. So
Hey,
Kamala
he
Harris
won
is leading.
because of the electoral college.
Correct. So a good bump for the Democrats. Like I said, a declining enthusiasm problem. So people, I think, are more enthusiastic about voting for Kamala Harris. She had as good a launch as anybody could have. Now we'll see what happens when the euphoria dies down and the race continues, and we won't know for a bit of time.
Well, things have definitely changed, and anyone telling you they know how it will turn out, well, they're lying to you at this point. Give it a little time. Watch for the trends. Darrell Bricker, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.